On the northern side, the sea ice extent is becoming compromised radically, and we need to really start paying attention to what the signals are telling us. So I just want to tell you a quick story that when I met Keith last year and I became Facebook friends with him, I began to follow his journey as I heard that he was going to ride his bicycle to the South Pole. And so I said, well, wait a minute. You got to be kidding me, right? You're going to ride your bicycle to the South Pole? And not only did he do that, but he figured out how to post on Facebook almost daily or every other day, and they were extraordinary. I mean, really, really good National Geographic quality photographs. And plus, he was somehow, after he thought his fingers out, able to write a very, very, very good descriptor of the day's and the week's event. And so I'm not going to steal any more thunder, but it was an extraordinary experience, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Keith, and also Doug, of course, your experiences as the foremost Arctic explorer and Antarctic explorer. So thanks so much for staying awake, all you folks, and really this is going to be an extraordinary talk.
All right. We are going to dive right in. And Keith is going to start us off. This is, by the way...
Oh, sorry, am I supposed to be standing up or waiting for you?
No, you're supposed to be standing up.
Okay.
This is the alcohol-fueled version of the...
But I've just been drinking water.
Well, then you've got problems. Go for it, buddy.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone, and delighted to see so many of you here this evening dragging away from drinks, so I'm very, very impressed. Thank you, Chip. Very, very complimentary. And I also highlight sitting with these guys. We have an extraordinary explorer here, by the way. I'm just an amateur explorer. This guy's a professional, serious explorer. I just do this for fun. So look, I'm a very keen cyclist, but I'm also a keen explorer. And for many, many years, probably since I was a child, I've always wanted to go to the south. Oh, we've started already. I'm sorry. Can we go back to start? And what I've done here to respect my colleagues, I've put this on a 15-minute automatic run-through, so it keeps me to time. So if I get out of sync, that's because I can't control the slides once we start. So just hold on for 1 second. So my background is, yes, I've always wanted to go to the North Pole and South Pole. I do love cycling. And I just wanted to find out what could be done on a bike. I had no idea, quite frankly. And so this is my little story. I've only given one presentation of this since I returned, and that was to my daughter's little school. She's 9 years of age. And the test for you tonight, if you do ask any questions, is whether they're going to be as good as the questions I was asked by these young kids. They were absolutely gobsmacking, brilliant questions. Anyway, we can go. Thank you very much. So in April of last year, we flew up to Svalbard, which is an island way up north at the 89th parallel, I think it is. And it's about the size of Switzerland. So it's actually quite a large-ish island way in the north. And it's surprisingly beautiful and mountainous. If anyone can get there, it's easy to get there. It's a beautiful town in Longyearbyen. I mean, it really is quite a stunning place. And here we are on the skidoos looking for polar bears. There's about 2,000 polar bears in Svalbard. I didn't see one the whole time, unfortunately. While we were out in the North Pole, one came into town in Longyearbyen. Didn't see it. It's just beautiful. Unfortunately, you can see the signs of climate change. There's a lot of open expanses of water that are now emerging, and it's changing the routes as a result. But there is clear evidence of climate change up there. And this is the global seed vault, which many of you will be aware of. It contains most of the seeds in the world. It's been used once in Syria a couple of years ago, and there was a leak of water into the seed vault just recently because of the melting permafrost. So there's more evidence of climate change there. I took my bike. I had just bought this bike. I had no idea what we could do up there, but what I decided to do was to test it. And while we were waiting in Svalbard, because in fact it was we were delayed getting onto the ice because of the cracking ice. And so while we were there, we for about 7 days, I was testing what I could do on the bike. Unfortunately, because we had no idea what we could do, my teammate said, "Keith, no way. we can't do it. So they put the pressure on me, and I relented and said, okay, it's going to be too risky, because we'd lost about 7 days getting up there, and they closed the airport to get everyone off the ice. So therefore we couldn't take the risk. So I took the bike up onto the ice, but I didn't take it on the trip itself. And so we set off, basically then fly up onto the ice. We took a helicopter out to we did the last 1.5 degrees, that's about 162 kilometres. And then we took a helicopter out to that spot, and then we started skiing. And from that point, you are completely alone, except for a few other teams that are skiing. But from that spot, for the next, I think, 10 days, we were just completely alone with our team. And it is just beautiful. You see these ice formations. Basically, it's ice about the size of the United States of America, floating around because of the currents that are underneath. And so think of 3 or 4 metres of ice, the size of America, pushing and shoving and crashing into each other. And it just creates these beautiful ice formations everywhere. I found myself pretty strong, so I was cursing myself because the conditions were perfect for cycling. But I found myself there, for I had time to take photographs, muck around, jumping. I had a lot of energy, and so I just found myself a little bit frustrated, but I didn't have my bike with me, but loving every minute. I really actually loved every single minute of this, and my teammates did as well. It was just so spectacularly beautiful, seeing crystal clear, blue, green ice. And as you can see here, literally just about every mound ice pressure we found, I just loved jumping off them. So at night time when you'd sleep, actually, sometimes we would float in the order of 1 kilometre, 1.5 kilometres overnight, just because the currents. And sometimes you have these, overnight these ice ridges form, and sometimes they would break apart, and you'd have these channels of water, and you'd look down, and that's the Arctic Ocean. Anyway, so after 10 days, we arrived at North Pole. Of course, the North Pole, there's nothing there because it's always floating around. So beautifully, there's no evidence of human existence there. And every 15 minutes, we'd put a hole in about where the North Pole is, and it keeps floating away. So it's a wonderful experience, and I just had a lovely, peaceful time amongst all this lovely ice. And when we got there, we were flown out. The Russians brought the helicopter in, and guess what? The Russians brought my bicycle. It was so sweet. I didn't ask them. It was so sweet of them, and they got off the helicopter and said, "Here's your bike." So I was able to at least cycle around the North Pole at the 1 second mark, which is about 30 metres circumference around the pole. Flew back to Borneo, which is where the airport is, and the next stop, of course, was the South Pole. So 7 months later, headed off with 2 of my teammates, Eric Phillips, who's a very well-renowned Arctic explorer. I fired him as my guide. I said, no, we're not going guided. We're going to have equal risk between the 3 of us. We started on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is the ice shelf down below there. That's about the size of France. So it's a huge ice shelf. Our goal was to do a new route to the South Pole, where no other explorers had gone before, and we wanted to do it as a completely new human experience. And that meant being prepared for about 50 days on the ice. And as you can see there, that's my kit that I had to fit into my sled. And this time, because I'd fired Eric as my guide, but he was my teammate, I said, I'm taking my bike. No one's going to stop me. The problem was we had no idea what it was going to be like because it was a new route, right? So no humans had actually traversed this glacier before. We had this NASA photographs, but it couldn't measure the depth of the snow. Was it ice? Was it deep snow? Had no idea. So I took the risk. Our sleds weighed about 95 kilograms. We got rid of every single item that we didn't have to have to minimise the weight, except for my bike. But of course, that meant if I couldn't cycle, I'd put the bike on top of the sled, and that would go from 95 to 110 kilograms. But that was the risk I was just prepared to take. So that's what it looks like. There I was dragging my sled along, 195 kilograms behind me. What happened? We've flown into the Ross Ice Shelf, and suddenly the aeroplane disappeared, and the 3 of us were there just completely alone. Flat as a tack, the Ross Ice Shelf is about 300 metres thickness of ice, and it was just so peaceful. The closest human was the South Pole. There were 200 people there, and then it was New Zealand the other direction. No one else around, except for Doug, who was about, 400 kilometres away on his own trip. So it was just an extraordinary experience. About 4 days on the Ross Ice Shelf, but after about 5 kilometres of starting, I thought, this is actually pretty good snow, pretty good ice. I thought I could get the bike out and hitched it on and started cycling, and it was just perfect. And Eric and Rob, as I shot past them, they were cursing this time because I was going about 3 times the speed. So we had to work out a system because I was so far ahead of them, and what we worked out is every 5 kilometres I would stop, wait for them, and I'd be mucking around and playing. The next risk was getting onto the glacier. This is now, I'm a bit behind my schedule now. This is now on the glacier. The risk here was, what would the glacier be like? Was it going to be deep snow or ice? And when we got there, it was, again, unbelievably good conditions for cycling. It was good, solid ice. You can see our campsite there. Each night we would go to bed at sort of, get in the tent at about 6 o'clock. I'd get out my scientific journal. Then at 12 o'clock each day, the katabatic winds would start. And this is what it was like at exactly 12 o'clock. As you can hear, it was very, very windy. Now, not every day, but every 3rd day or so, we would get these very strong winds, and it was hard work. And of course, the wind would just go straight through your body. Now, fortunately here, it wasn't too cold. It was probably around 10-ish degrees, 10 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. Help me out. But what we're surrounded by were these 4,000 metre peaks, and the glacier is about 20 kilometres wide and 150 kilometres long. So it's massive. As you can see, we're just specks in the distance there. It's so vast, so beautiful, and extremely peaceful. And it was perfect for cycling. So I would get to the campsite, I would pitch the tent, lie down in my bed, read a book, and about an hour and a half later, Rob and Eric would roll up on their skis. So it was pretty fun. It gradually got a bit colder. As you can see here, it's still pretty warm, and perfect conditions. To be seeing these mountains, being the first people on Earth to traverse this glacier, was a deep psychological, emotional feeling, one that I can really treasure. But it did get colder, and as you get rising up, we went from 0 or 300 metres above sea level on the Ross Ice Shelf to 3,000 metres onto the plateau. You're obviously climbing up a lot. And then gradually the crevasses started to appear. Now, some of these would be quite obvious. I obviously saw this one and I thought, hey, this looks fun, I'll just cycle over it. And if I fell down there, it would go a fair way. But I was pretty cocky at this stage, and this is pretty good, just keep going, until I went head first here. And then it got a bit scary. Of course, with a bike, you've got 2 pressure points. It's not like skis, you've got all the weight laid out, so it's much more dangerous. The crevasses got a bit wider, so I thought, okay, I better start taking care here. And as we're going up the glacier, realised, okay, they're getting a bit scary. So this is the map showing all the glacier at the top of all the crevasses at the top of the glacier. So that's what we knew. We knew it was scary. We knew it was going to be bad, but we just didn't know how bad. And that's a photograph from the 1950s. You can see how scary these crevasses are, and somehow we had to get through these with me on my bike. Now, as it turned out, that just wasn't possible because these crevasses became about 100 metres wide, as you can see. Now, some of these were covered. Then we would put the bike on my sled. We'd rope up. And on some of the crevasses, we were actually, all 3 of us were on the crevasse at the same time, which is ridiculously dangerous. Finally, we got through them all. So we got through the top of the glacier, that's looking back to where we'd come from, and we pitched the tent and thought, fantastic, we've done the hard part, no risk now, easy, all the way through, until the crevasses that did not appear, appeared. And this is where I went straight through. And I was dangling there, looking down, head down into the crevasse, and at this point, the ice is 3 kilometres deep. That's 2 miles straight down. And my calculations were that had I fallen, if I get my calculations right, I would have reached, I think, about 140 miles per hour by the time I got to the bottom, and a 52-second free fall to hit the bottom. Of course, hit the bottom, had I survived, I'd then have a massive bike and then a massive sled hit me on the head. So there's no way I would have survived. Anyway, it was scary. I was face down in this crevasse. I was able to clamber out. I was held only by my sled, my 95-kilogram sled that was holding me. So that was a moment in my life where I realised that life is short. So I clambered out, and the next stage was this fantastic thing which Doug will know also well, which is the sastrugi, which is these wind-formed ice, snow. And it's absolutely beautiful. This is Christmas Day, and put out the stockings, didn't get anything. But you can just see the beauty of the place, the sastrugi. The problem was, of course, cycling on sastrugi with carrying 95 kilograms is very hard, because when I'm going up with a bike, the sled's going down, and when I'm going down, the sled's going up, and ended up getting off my bike and pulling the sled. It was very hard work. My previous slide there was I had very bad snow blindness for 24 hours, so I put these goggles on to allow me to survive that. This is the summer solstice day. Happy summer solstice, by the way, today. So this is exactly 6 months ago. Now, if you want you think you got a summer solstice here, we'll look at the summer solstice down there, because we had 24-hour sun, of course. So there was no sunset. And it's a lovely feeling skiing along. You just got the sun doing this the whole time. It's just going on. Now it got really cold, right? Now it's about minus 30 degrees Celsius. And when it was windy, that makes about minus 52 degrees Celsius, which I think I'm terrible in Fahrenheit. That's minus 62 degrees Fahrenheit. So you've got to cover everything on your body. You cannot have any skin showing. Unfortunately, Rob, who's on the left, one day, without even knowing it, had his earlobe somehow showing. And we didn't notice it, so he lost his earlobe. Just pop. I mean, this is weeks later he lost, because it turned beautiful purple. Really lovely, beautiful, chunky purple. Now, and then having got through the sastrugi, and by this stage, the snow was very deep, so I could not cycle. I had to put the bike on my sled. And this was just so beautiful, though. This is wilderness in its absolute purity. All we saw here were snow, ice, sky, blue sky, clouds, and sun. That's it. There was no moon, there were no stars, there were no planes, there were no animals, there were no plants, nothing else. And that I found just the most extraordinary purity and silence, of course. So we had sort of 2 weeks of this. Now, that would drive some people batty. Just like if I was doing knitting or yoga, it would drive me batty. This is my form of meditation, okay? Up at 6 o'clock, out of the tent by 7:30, freezing outside, but then just ski and cycle for 8 hours a day, and doing that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks was my form of meditation. You know what? The first thing I saw when we got to the South Pole, first sense, was the smell of diesel. Having all this wind, this power coming down onto you, and what do? We ship all the diesel along a road to go there, and they burn it. And it drives me nuts we don't have a wind farm at the South Pole. Anyway, the irony. There we are at the South Pole. I'm at exactly 15 minutes, and it was a wonderful feeling. I mean, it's a great sense of achievement. It was the first, I think, unless Doug corrects me here, the first unsupported, meaning we didn't have a truck or a car, unsupported cyclist from the coast to the South Pole, and on a new route that no one had done before. So it was a great sense of achievement, but also a great sense of humility, being such a tiny speck on this extraordinary continent, and with 2 great guys, by the way. I must pay great commendation. We got an extraordinary, we had barely laughs every night in the tent. I won't tell you what we laughed about, but it was pretty petty. But it was hellishly funny. I can't even recall what we laughed about, but yes, so it was a wonderfully emotional and mind-changing experience and life-changing experience, and one that I hope in some shape or form we can all experience somehow. One last point I'd say is that it is melting. When people talk about, is the Antarctic, I mean, absolutely is melting. And West Antarctica in particular, particularly the peninsula. And just a quick calculation, the latest science shows that we will be rising sea levels of in the order of 1 to 2 metres in the next 75 years. And beyond that, another 15 metres. If it all melted, which is, it is literally 1,000 years away, it's 60 metres, 70 metres of sea level rise. But it is melting, and we're triggering it, and we're on an urgent path to stop it. The natural capital valuation of the Antarctica, the biggest natural capital valuation, is to keep the ice there. And that's what we have to do. Otherwise, we're all in deep trouble. But I don't want to finish on a negative note, just to say how much I valued the opportunity to experience this extraordinary place that I hope you all get the opportunity of going, for those who haven't. But thank you.
Thank you.